continue to stand by for today's conference. Conference will begin in a few minutes. All lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer sessions. At that time, please press star 1 and record your name as prompted. Again, thank you for your patience. Please continue to stand by for today's conference. Welcome, and thank you for standing by. All lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer sessions. At that time, please press star 1 and record your name as prompted. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn today's meeting over to Monica Whitt. Thank you. You may begin.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Monica Whitt from NASA's Office of Communications. Thank you all for joining us today to talk with experts about the science investigations that will be launching on SpaceX's 23rd commercial resupply mission to the agency to the International Space Station. Launch is targeted for Sunday, August 28th, an instantaneous launch window that will open at approximately 3:37 a.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A in NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And please excuse me, that launch is targeted for Saturday, August 28th. The Dragon spacecraft will deliver more than 4,000 kilograms of cargo to the orbiting laboratory, including critical supplies in support of some of 200 to 300 experiments that are ongoing at any given time aboard the space station. Here to talk with us today about some of the science launching aboard the Dragon mission are the experts. For Apex 08, we have Dr. Patrick Masson. We have Dr. Claudia Stern, project lead for retinal diagnostics investigation. To talk about the Gitai robotic arm, we have Dr. Toyotaka Kozuki and Dr. Yusuke Taguchi. And to discuss MISSY 15, we have Ian Karcher. And to discuss a new research facility, the Faraday Research Facility, we have Jeff Fitch. Our speakers will provide a brief overview of the research, and we will open the lines for a few questions after each speaker. If we have time at the end, we will open up lines for additional questions. Your phones are on mute now, and to get into the question queue, you can press star 1 on your phone at any time. The operator will call on you and open your mic so that you can ask your question. We do ask that you please stick to one question, but if we have time, we'll allow reporters to ask a second question. About 1 hour after we conclude, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference by dialing toll-free at 888-566-0452. One more time, that's 888-566-0452. To start, we'll hear from Jennifer Scott Williams, Manager at the Applications Client Support Office for NASA's International Space Station Program Research Office at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, for an overview of some of the science going up on this mission. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you to everyone joining in to learn about some of the exciting science we are launching to our orbiting microgravity laboratory this week. At any given time, there are hundreds of experiments across many disciplines of science being conducted on the space station, from cell science to astrobiology, animals to plants, technology demonstrations to remote sensing. Today's conversation will highlight research about exposing materials to the harsh environment of space, studying the stress response of plants to microgravity, protecting bone health with botanical byproducts from a familiar fermented grape product, and much more. The space station is an active, vibrant laboratory where we are making the next steps of space exploration possible. As we set our sights on the moon and beyond, it is the knowledge and practical experience we've gained from more than 20 years of continuous human presence and research on the space station that will pave a successful path forward. The things we do to further those exploration goals also pay dividends back here on Earth. For example, research on this mission could help us better understand and mitigate bone loss for postmenopausal women, demonstrate robotic dexterity in space, and even inspire and motivate girls around the world to pursue STEM careers. As you know, we have 5 fully capable astronauts and 2 cosmonauts on board that are equipped with the training and expertise to do cutting-edge research. And this mission will deliver just more than 1,000 kilograms of science to the space station. This creates a unique challenge for our office, along with the rest of the ISS program, to work diligently together to find the right balance between launching crew provisions and research, what we call utilization, on any given spacecraft. That's why we are so excited to hear from a select few of our principal investigators and payload developers on this call. It is an opportunity for us to get up close and personal with the people that have worked so hard to produce the content that will be executed on board in the coming months. Their work continues to build on decades of insights from our orbiting laboratory's rich history. They and thousands of other scientists are building the pathway for humanity's future in space. To keep up with the space station science, you can visit www.nasa.gov/ISS-science. You can follow us at ISS_research on Twitter. Thank you again for being here, and we look forward to your questions. Back to you, Monica.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Now we will hear from Patrick Masson, Professor of Genetics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Principal Investigator for APEX-08. The APEX-08 experiment will study plants' genetic responses to stress to identify key targets for genetic engineering of plants that are more suited to microgravity. We'll start with you, Dr. Masson.
Thank you, Monica, and good afternoon, everyone. So, as Monica just mentioned, APEX-08 is an experiment that deals with plant responses to the stress associated with exposure to the microgravity environment. So this experiment derives from the observation that has been made by many research teams, including ours, that plants grown under microgravity conditions are actually stressed. So, turns out that plant biologists have been studying plant responses to environmental stresses on Earth for many, many years, and we know quite a lot about the mechanisms that allow them to cope with such stresses. One such mechanism is actually the accumulation of a group of compounds that are named polyamines. These compounds accumulate in response to stresses like drought stress, heat stress, cold stress, a whole range of stresses on Earth. What is interesting about them is that upon accumulation, they actually contribute to stress mitigation. They help the plant cope with the stress itself. Now, when you analyze plants grown under microgravity conditions, they show all signs of stress, but there is no evidence of activation of the pathways that are typically associated with polyamine accumulation. So we wondered if the stress symptoms that are displayed by plants exposed to microgravity might be a consequence of their inability to activate the polyamine mitigation pathway under those conditions. And so in APEX-08, we will test a number of plants that have been genetically altered to accumulate either more or less of a particular polyamine that is named putrescine. Doesn't matter what it's named, really, except for the fact that normally on Earth, if a plant is stressed, it accumulates putrescine, and putrescine contributes to stress mitigation. So we have engineered Arabidopsis thaliana, that's a plant that's typically used as a model system in these studies. We have engineered plants to alter their ability to accumulate putrescine. we will germinate seeds from those various lines on agar-based media in Petri dishes on the ground. They will be transported to the International Space Station, where the plates will be photographed and then placed in a veggie growth chamber, where the seeds will be allowed to germinate and grow for a period of 9 days. And at the end of this growth period, the plates will be photographed again, then the seedlings will be harvested, fixed, and then returned to the ground, where then returned to our lab, where we will extract RNA and analyze the expression of the genes. A ground control that imitates the growth conditions carried out on ISS will also be run at Kennedy Space Center. At the end of the experiment, we'll be able to use the photographs that were taken both on ISS and in the ground control to quantify growth. We will also be able to determine the changes in expression patterns that are found for those various lines in response to the microgravity environment. From these data, we should be able to determine if some of the alterations in the polyamine pathway actually lead to changes in the ability of the plant to cope with the stress environment associated with microgravity. In terms of broader impact, this project may provide a foundation for more sophisticated approaches down the road to engineer plants that may be better adapted to growth under microgravity, with potential applications as key components of bioregenerative life support systems. Importantly, I'd like to add this brief talk by emphasizing that the project is carried out by Dr. Xiang Su, who is an assistant scientist in the lab, and it's done in collaboration with the Kennedy Space Center payload development team. They have done a tremendous amount of work, really, to optimize this experiment in such a way that it can be carried out now on ISS. And they are currently in the process of preparing for this flight, and that's why they could not join us today. So thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Monica?
Okay, if reporters would like to ask a question about Apex 08, please go ahead and press *1 on your phone. The operator will announce you and open and close your mic for you to ask your question. Please stick to one question, and if we have time, we'll allow for the follow-up.
And we do have a question coming from Marcia Dunn from Associated Press. Your line is open.
Yes, hello, thank you. Is there only one type of plant flying, the mustard family plant, Silcrest? And I see in your literature that you refer to some mutant strains that you're going to be flying. Could you talk a little bit more about how they differ from your basic variety Silcrest, and any idea how many numbers of all these will be flying? Thank you.
Absolutely, a great question. So yes, we will grow Arabidopsis thaliana, which is a model system. We will basically use the wild-type plant, and then a number of lines that have been modified to change their ability to accumulate putrescine. We will have mutants of Arabidopsis thaliana, 2 mutant lines that are affected in a gene that encodes an enzyme that is involved in putrescine degradation. So those mutations will lead to increased accumulation of putrescine. We will also have another mutant that affects a gene that encodes an enzyme involved in the biosynthesis of putrescine. So those ones will accumulate less putrescine. Finally, we will have 2 other lines that have been genetically engineered to overexpress the same 2 genes. So one of the lines overexpresses the gene that encodes the enzyme involved in biosynthesis, and therefore it will accumulate more putrescine. And the last one will basically be a transgenic plant that expresses a higher level of an enzyme involved in putrescine degradation, and so that one will again accumulate less putrescine. So by comparing both growth and expression patterns between those mutant and transgenic lines on one end and the wild type on the other end, we should be able to determine if some of those either mutant or transgenic lines display increased tolerance to the microgravity environment compared to the ground control, and also whether substantial changes in expression of genes occurs in those lines in response to the microgravity environment.
Thank you, Dr. Masson. Thank you. I actually have a question of my own. I'm curious if this work could have potential impact on plant stress responses on Earth.
Absolutely. So it turns out that this particular pathway, as I mentioned during the talk, that pathway has been heavily investigated in plants. And some of the transgenic lines that we are using in APEX-08 turn out to be transgenic lines that have been tested for their ability to improve plant tolerance to stress. For instance, an Arabidopsis plant that overexpresses the arginine decarboxylase gene, which is the gene that encodes an enzyme involved in putrescine biosynthesis. Plants that overexpress that particular gene have been shown to be more tolerant to drought stress and actually also heat stress and another group of environmental stresses on Earth. So it is possible by engineering plants to either overexpress or decrease expression of some of those targeted genes that we can modulate their ability to respond to environmental stresses. Now remember, we are talking about environmental stresses that matter a lot in an environment with climate change. We're talking about drought response, for instance, response to osmoticum. So all of those types of stresses are being more and more frequent in terms of their action on plants. And so if it is possible to gain information to engineer plants that are quite well adapted to those stresses, that's a win-win situation both on Earth and for plants grown in space. Monica?
Thank you. And next up is Dr. Claudia Stern, project lead for the Retinal Diagnostics Investigation. Dr. Stern is an ophthalmologist, flight surgeon, and head of the Department of Clinical Aerospace Medicine for the Institute of Aerospace Medicine at the German Aerospace Center in Cologne, Germany. The study is a collaborative effort between the German Aerospace Center and the European Astronaut Center to demonstrate a small device for examining eye changes during spaceflight. Dr. Stern?
Thank you, Monica. Did you know that over 2/3 of astronauts on long-duration space missions experience abnormal eye changes? How will we ensure that astronauts receive medical monitoring of their eyes on long-duration missions? In my department, the Clinical Aerospace Medicine, we examine, select, and certify the European astronauts. So we have seen changes in the eyes in astronauts. Together with Scott Ritter and Jürgen Drescher and other engineers and scientists of the European Astronaut Center, we developed this experiment for the Cosmic Kiss mission aboard ISS Increment 66. And with funding from DLR Technology Marketing, this was possible. This International Space Station technology demonstration experiment addresses medical support challenges with astronaut eye monitoring. The background of this experiment is that eye changes occur in nearly 2/3 of astronauts on long-duration missions. Many of these eye changes can be seen in the optic disc region of the retina, which is the back of the eye, which connects the eye to the brain. These eye changes contribute to a constellation of symptoms, which have altogether been termed spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome (SANS). To monitor these changes during spaceflight, optical coherence tomography (OCT) scanners have been launched to the International Space Station. But these machines are very expensive. They are the gold standards in clinical ophthalmology, but they cost approximately $100,000 and weigh over 10 kilograms, which creates about the same amount of dollars for launch. Why is this significant? The spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome (SANS) is described as the #2 red risk for human travel to Mars. And to address this risk, focus on developing small footprint diagnostic devices for expeditionary spaceflight is needed, which will also minimize launch costs. To address this need and to do it with small footprint diagnostic devices that are also minimally or non-invasive, our team developed an experiment for International Space Station Increment 66 to test small, mobile device-based retinal diagnostics for use aboard ISS. Our objectives are to demonstrate that these devices can show progression of the spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome and to demonstrate that machine learning models can detect images of SANS collected from these devices so that in the future astronauts can diagnose eye changes on their own without support of the in future far away flight surgeon. The hardware for use during Increment 66 is comprised of two components: a commercially available off-the-shelf lens, which was selected based on previous research on weight and usability, and a custom 3D printed adapter for attachment to the astronaut's iPad with a total weight of only 30 grams. With the data collected from this experiment, we plan to validate this technology for use in space operating environment and use the videos collected to train models to detect eye changes due to optic disc edema. On Earth, this could have applications in detecting common eye problems, for instance, glaucoma, rise in intraocular pressure, age or injury-related pathology, for patients without easy access to medical specialists. An example use case could be in remote regions, as this application would provide tools that can be widely used at a reduced cost to support developing economies. In space, models to detect SANS could be useful to determine the need for countermeasures. This would enable continued eye health in astronauts on long-duration missions beyond low Earth orbit as we venture forward to the Moon and to Mars. Thank you, and back to Monica.
Thank you. We will now take questions for Dr. Stern. We also have Dr. Jürgen Drescher and Dr. Scott Ritter, Principal Investigators for Retinal Diagnostics, and Owen Toohey, who is the European Astronaut Center, here to answer questions. Again, please press *1 to be entered into the queue each time. I have a question. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the value and the importance of monitoring astronaut eyes during spaceflight.
So far, we don't know the etiology of the eye changes. We don't know where it comes from. So it is important to monitor the eye changes in combination with the environmental changes to get some information and hints to do further research on the source of these eye changes. And in the middle and long future, we would like to apply countermeasures to reduce the eye changes, and therefore it's important to see what is going on with the eyes. And of course, we would like to have healthy eyes in the astronauts when they finally approach and land on Mars. Back to Monica.
Great. Next, we will hear from Toyotaka Kozuki, Chief Technology Officer of Gitai Inc. and Principal Investigator of the Gitai Robotic Arm Tech Demo, and Dr. Yusuke Taguchi, Director of Business Development of Gitai Inc. They will discuss the technology demonstration of a robotic arm designed to conduct common crew activities directed by teleoperations from Earth. Over to you, Toyotaka.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, NASA, for giving us the opportunity. We're really excited to have our Gitai robot going to space. Gitai is a space robotics startup that aims to provide safe and affordable means of labor in space. The Gitai S1 robot arm is a technology demonstration to prove the versatility, dexterity, and safety of our robots in microgravity. Let me introduce our robot and what we are trying to do in space. The robot has 8 degrees of freedom, or 8 joints, with a hand camera for autonomous operation and 2 high-resolution cameras at the root for teleoperations. The demonstration will consist of 2 experiments. In the first experiment, the S1 robot will show its capability of executing an example of in-space assembly tasks. With restriction to launch mass and size, there are high expectations for the utilization of advanced robotics to assemble large structures from pieces that fit in the limited launch capacity. The robot will handle small parts and put them together to construct a large assembly, and then attach panels to it imitating a solar panel or antennas. Most of the robot's operations will be conducted autonomously, while the operator on ground is monitoring or making some decisions in case any unexpected errors occur. The next experiment is for intravehicular activity, or IVA activities, that the crew do daily on the ISS, like flipping switches, turning knobs, pulling in and out cables, etc. We'll be conducting this experiment with both autonomous operation and teleoperations, where an operator on Earth will have full control of the robot through a remote controller and a head-mount display. By 2023, we're also planning to conduct our next technology demonstration, this time exposed to the environment in space, to perform docking and life extension operations for on-orbit servicing. The ultimate goal of Gitai is to provide in-space robotics as a service. We will provide a much more affordable and safe means of work in space and lower the costs of doing something in space down to 100 times or less. We believe that with an affordable option to getting things done in space, it will open up doors to the true commercialization of space. 10 years from now, we foresee our robots working on the moon, doing exploration, mining, building the first human habitations, and this tech demo will be the first big step. With some cool videos showing how we've succeeded in conducting these experiments in the mock setup, so please visit our website. Thank you. Back to Monica.
We will now take questions about the Gitai robotic arm. Again, please press *1 to be entered into the queue.
We do have a question from Paul Brinkman from UPI. Your line is open.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I was wondering if you could compare the GITAI experiment to other types of robotics that have been used on the space station, or that I think there are some that are like floating robots that move through the air on their own. I assume this will be anchored somewhere. So could you talk about the difference, why this one is not floating?
So GITAI has been focusing a robot that can do types of dexterous tasks, and to have a robot do some accurate actions or dexterous manipulations, the position of the robot is very important. So we have designed the mission with a robot attached to the wall inside the ISS. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Marcia Dunn from Associated Press. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, thank you. Is this robot, I'm assuming you're just taking up one arm, and is it life size? Would it be comparable to the size of a man's arm, for instance, or is it bigger? And has this robot been tested, has it been used or tested on Earth with maybe car manufacturing or some other manufacturing tasks here on Earth? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. The robotic arm that we are sending is about 20 kilograms, and the size is about the same as human arm. We have been developing this robotic arm only for space applications. Thank you.
If I could ask one more question, what is the trickiest kind of tasks do you think this robot arm could do, and how does it compare to the Robonaut that NASA was working with, the humanoid robot, some years back?
Thank you. So the experiment that we are doing is, one of the experiments we are conducting is in-space assembly, where we assemble small parts together and like tighten the screws. And it's a combination of various motions. And I think that's pretty tricky enough, even for human to do for the first time. And compared to, for example, a Robonaut, let me see. We've been focusing on developing a robot with dexterous task capability, but we've been trying to build the robot as simple and practical as possible for providing robotics as a service in the close future. So we've really focused on developing the robot to be simple and robust, and so that it can really last long. Thank you.
And if I may add to that, Robonaut was, from our understanding, was more like a research experiment. So the purpose of Robonaut was to challenge new capabilities using autonomy. But in our case, we're focused more on having a robot being able to complete specialized tasks, not everything in this case. So we're focused more on being able to complete the tasks that we designed the robot to do, but not be capable of doing everything that someone would ask a robot to do. Back to you, Monica.
Thank you. And now we will go to Ian Karcher, project engineer for MISSY 15, an experiment that will expose materials such as concrete, thin film solar cells, and more to harsh environment of space to test their performance and their durability. Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I am the MISSY project engineer with Aegis Aerospace, which is a brand new merger between Alpha Space and MEI Technologies. Our MISSY platform is a commercial external facility on the ISS that strives to make it as easy as possible for our customers to demonstrate new technologies. We fly approximately every 6 months, carrying new experiments each flight. MISSY provides an unprecedented ability to test virtually anything, such as electronics, solar cells, materials, systems, and communications links. The external space environment where MISSY is installed includes extreme levels of solar and charged particle radiation, atomic oxygen, hard vacuum, and temperature extremes. An experiment will be integrated into a MISSY science carrier and can face any orbital direction on MISSY, those being RAM, Wake, Zenith, and Nadir, or it can be completely enclosed in the MISSY carrier. MISSY broadens access to space for virtually any company, university scientist, or even, in some cases, high school students. Our current flight, MISSY 15, will be flying on SpaceX 23 and will consist of experiments from multiple principal investigators that will test how their experiment will react to direct exposure to space, like lunar concrete, deployable structures, protective coatings for future spacecraft, wearable radiation protection, hyperspectral imaging equipment, solar cell assembly validation, and durability of 3D printed nanocomposites. The MISSY 15 principal investigators consist of NASA materials scientists, commercial space technology companies, and university scientists. Experiments are integrated into 4 MISSY carriers, which will be installed onto the MISSY flight facility using the ISS robotics arm. Our operations team will be commanding the MISSY carriers to open and close as necessary for exposure or safety, all while taking on-orbit photos of the experiments and providing them along with environmental data to the principal investigators. Our one experiment that I would like to highlight is the Hyperspectral Imager from Nanomics, a small company in Austin, Texas. The imaging system will be looking at the edge or Earth limb, and will look at the atmosphere and will study the survival and calibration of their microprocessor and camera system. We are very excited to be launching MISSY 15 this weekend, as well as preparing for a launch of MISSY 16 this spring, with a whole new suite of experiments. We pride ourselves on quick turnarounds for our customers and ease of flying experiments on the ISS, where we manage all NASA requirements and communication to avoid delays for those not as familiar with the process. We are always looking to help anyone that has a need to test in space, but may not have the resources, knowledge, or time to do it themselves. Thank you. Back to you, Monica.
We will now take questions for Ian about the MISSY 15 series of experiments. Again, please press *1 to enter into the queue. Ian, I have a question for you. How can someone get their experiment onto MISSY?
So typically, CASIS, or the ISS National Labs, is where most of our NASA scientists will set up their experiments and funding through there. We also offer the ability to go directly through us, and we will be able to manage all of your experiments too. So anybody that is looking to fly on MISSY can go to alphaspace.com or aegisaerospace.com and can then contact us, and we can get a contract going.
Thank you, Ian. Next, we'll hear from Jeff Fitch, Mission Manager for the Faraday Research Facility, a new tool for conducting small experiments in microgravity. During this first mission, the facility will host a study testing remote drug delivery, as well as some experiments designed by Girl Scouts. Jeff?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, this is our maiden voyage of the Faraday Research Facility. It's designed to be a laboratory, if you will, of 12 enclosures that can meet science needs of anyone who has a need. Much like Ian just commented, we're looking to expand who can join and who can be part of space science. To that, we have three objectives on this mission. One is with the Houston Methodist Research Institute to fully develop and perfect a drug delivery device. This drug delivery device would help help scientists perform research on board space station, as well as could have future ramifications to human beings in delivery of their drugs. We're doing this in partnership with Dr. Alessandro Gattoni and Dr. Nicola Detrani. Our second one is a STEM outreach effort. It's a collaboration with the Girl Scouts of Citrus Council, Making Space for Girls, and the Second Baptist School of Houston, Texas. So the goal of this is to have a year-long enrichment in space and science for youth. We started this partnership, especially with the Girl Scouts, last October, when they offered a competition to their youths. To that, we had 680 responses for ideas as to what they would like to fly to space. In this, we've down selected it to ants, plants, and sea monkeys / brine shrimp. The facility is unique in that what we're trying to accomplish is to get the science into the kids' hands. So the kids will be able to load the ants, the plants, and the sea monkeys into their kits, if you will, have them in their house, in their school, and study the changes that occurred day to day. While on orbit, we will be taking photographs day to day, and they will be able to compare and contrast the photographs. We noticed at Proxops, our company, that many individual high schools have been able to fly to space station and do science. Very few have seemingly reached the general populace and scaled that idea out amongst multiple schools, and we're going to try and allow this outreach to all the schools that we can find. And then finally, we want to finalize our checkout of the Faraday Research Facility as it's a maiden voyage and make sure that we're prepared to do any and all the science that could be proposed for us. Monica, that's what I have.
Great. We will now take questions for Jeff about the Faraday Research Facility. Please press *1 to get in the queue. Jeff, I have a question about the possibility of other experiments. So once the Faraday Research Facility has been validated, what kind of other experiments do you expect to host?
Well, we're hoping to, again, reach out to more youths, get what their idea, what their interest is, and continue our STEM collaboration. Our belief is that we've heard from a number of the major corporations, at least in the United States, that scientists are their limiting factor. They can't find enough scientists. We're hoping to cement kids' desire, knowledge, love of space and science to stay with it and go all the way through and graduate with college degrees in the STEM fields. Thank you for that question, Monica.
Thank you. And we do have a question from the phones from Amy Thompson from space.com. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I was wondering if this hardware is something that's going to stay on station or if it's going to come back down at a later date. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy, for the question. This particular mission will be a short, it will stay with SpaceX 23. It will arrive and then depart with it. The facility does have the ability to stay on board for longer periods of time. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And finally, we do have one more briefer who joined. We will hear from Dr. Fabio Peluso, team leader for the READY-FP experiment. This investigation studies how biocollagen and bioactive metabolites sourced from waste products in wine production could have potential protective effects on bone tissue during spaceflight. Take it away, Dr. Peluso. I think we may have a technical glitch, so at this time, we will go ahead and take additional questions for any of our speakers. Again, if you'd like to ask a question for any of the briefers that we had, please press *1 on your phone. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so that does conclude our questions for today. Thank you, everybody, for your interest in this important science, research, and technology that is heading to the International Space Station on the next SpaceX cargo resupply mission. You can read more about our featured investigations in a story now online at www.nasa.gov/ISS-science. Please stay tuned to nasa.gov/SpaceX for more details about the upcoming launch and coverage on NASA TV. You can follow along with our researchers and these studies by following @ISS_research on Twitter. And again, you can listen to a replay of this conference by dialing 888-566-0452, 888-566-0452. The replay will be available starting about an hour after the conclusion of this call. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. That concludes today's conference call. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.